has been the Chief Executive Officer for Chugach Electric since July of 2016. And Lee has been involved with labor negotiations, gas contract negotiations, and the ownership of Beluga gas field when Chugach bought into that. And he was definitely involved in the new construction of the power plant that he and the MLNP and at the time and MEA joined together. So Lee's been involved with Chugach since 1987. This is a long time, Lee. So he's been the Senior Vice President and in quite other titles along with it. So I'm just going to let Lee take off and give us a little update on how the merger came about and all of the headaches that he's had, which is working through and got this this accomplished, which was a great feat. So Lee, would you please start the meeting? Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Bernie. Good to see you, and good to see everybody here at Commonwealth North. It's really been, I think the last time I was here was about 3 years ago. And so I'm pleased to report that we are complete with the consolidation and we're into our first quarter of results. So what I'd like to do is start sharing the screen. And I hope this works. All right, so everybody should see I got thumbs up, so that's a good start. First off, I want to talk about our timeline, and the consolidation of Chugach and MLNP was a long process, and it's taken us a little over 3.5 years. The process was really urged by the business community in Anchorage. It was obviously supported by Chugach and the municipality of Anchorage, and further supported by a 65% majority vote. The process was vetted by the Regulatory Commission of Alaska and several interveners. A settlement with interveners was reached, and ultimately the RCA approved the acquisition with conditions that were met prior to closing on October 30th of 2020. We maintained 3 guiding principles throughout the process. It must be good for members, it must be good for employees, and it must be good for the community at large. As of today, rates have not increased. And I will say on the North District, the prior MLNP area, you haven't seen an increase for several years. So that's been, rates have been flat really since about 2017, 2018. We have not laid off any employees, but we have taken advantage of attrition. And we've had a reduction so far of roughly 20 positions. And I think by year's end, we should be looking at close to 40. For the community, we've provided $230 million to the MOA Trust Fund, and that will generate around $10 million per year, but that's certainly up to the municipality of how they use those funds. I think the maximum amount they can take is about 4.5% of the trust fund. From an electrical perspective, Chugach is about twice as large after consolidation. We have over 1,000 megawatts of installed generation capacity, which includes 328 megawatts of the Rail Belt's most efficient combined cycle power plants and 115 megawatts of hydroelectric power to meet a roughly 400 megawatt load. We have significant transmission assets that connect the Matsu Valley to the north, the Kenai Peninsula to the south, and Beluga to the west. The balance of our facilities serve roughly 100,000 member owners. Chugach had a very successful financing with a significant subscription interest over 5 times our needs of $800 million. Our weighted average interest rate was 2.73%. Our successful transition was due to the commitment from our employees. We created an integration management program with employees of both Chugach and MLNP. 11 functional teams from IS to system operations to engineering and member services were involved. They developed guiding principles program charters, target operating models, and ultimately the overall integration work plans. Our success was due to their hard work and dedication and commitment to the membership. And I really give it to the employees. They did an outstanding job of pulling this thing together. We also appreciate the patience and understanding of our new members upon consolidation. We did have a few weeks of long wait times on the phones and a few hiccups along the way, but I think overall it was a very successful and fairly seamless operation. And we received a lot of really great suggestions on how to improve service going forward. So we are very, very satisfied with how we made the transition. Long-term rates are estimated to be roughly 5 to 7% lower with the two utilities combined. We saw rate reductions effective the first quarter of 2021. You will note a larger reduction for North District members, which is due to the credit to reflect North District members contributed capital in the Beluga River field. This $36 million rebate is a result of a settlement with interveners during the regulatory process. The funds will be returned to the North District members over a 3-year period. The South District benefited through allocation of Fire Island wind and Singsa gas storage to all members. Operating costs will be less through economies of scale and consolidation of utility expertise. This graph compares the revenue requirement to the two utilities under the standalone case on the top line and the combined revenue requirement under Chugach ownership on the bottom line. What you see is a permanent downward shift. The difference between the two lines represents a net present value savings over the 15 years of $273 million. I would like to caution the rates will go up over time to reflect inflation and downward sales trends. We are currently challenged with rising costs and lower sales due to COVID. We are watching our expenses extremely closely and implementing cost measures identified in our integration efforts, but loss of revenue is impacting our bottom line, as I'm sure many of your organizations are seeing as well. The timing of the consolidation with COVID has been a challenge, but I truly believe the savings will help mitigate any future rate increases. We have talked to many new members in the North District, and many are asking when tariff changes will be made. Members don't like the fact that as streetlights, as an example, have been reduced to the new LED, they haven't changed the tariff. That's been one issue. Another issue has been the demand ratchet that the North customers are really not nuts about. And really, I don't think we're nuts about it right now either, because we're seeing there's more of a significant demand charge to the North District and the South District. And with this lower demand right now, we're seeing a lot lower revenues as a result of that. We are looking at all of these issues, and some may be solved with a tariff change, and others will require a change in a general rate case. We are required to complete our general rate case no later than December 31st, 2023. We are evaluating options to take a look at doing that sooner. The consolidation has truly been a community effort, and our thanks go out to everyone that has helped us along this journey. Chugach is now your cooperative, and your voice and involvement will help us make for a better utility. Now that the acquisition is complete, we are involved in a number of initiatives such as electric vehicle charging and the Rail Belt Reliability Organization. And now a few words about electric vehicles. You've probably seen and discussed more and more nationally this recent story. And here is just an example from General Motors. And I know a lot of the manufacturers are saying they're going to have mostly electric vehicles, into the 2020s and 2030s. But EVs are becoming more common in Alaska as well. Chugach has the EVs registered in the DMV database counted twice per year. At the end of December, there were roughly 1,300 electric vehicles registered in Alaska. That was up more than 12% over the past 6 months, keeping us on pace with the roughly 25% annual growth that we've seen. Our count is of the vehicles that plug into the grid. both all electric vehicles as well as the plug-in hybrids that run about 25 to 40 miles on a battery before being switched to the internal combustion engine. A lot of people assume that the EVs in Alaska are mostly in the Southeast. Well, that might have been true initially. Our recent counts have shown that about half are registered in the rail belt. Chugach offers a number of electric vehicle incentive programs. And I ask you to please visit our website to see the specific programs for both residential and commercial members. If you have any questions, please give Sean Scaling, our Business and Sustainability Program Manager, a call. Many are intended to help install charging facilities. While studies show most charging occurs at home, I'd like to highlight at least one program focused on public charging. Our goal of this research program is to help us learn more about the use of publicly available chargers. Chugach contributed $7,500 to the cost of installing facilities at 4 locations where members volunteered to host charging. In return, Chugach will get 36 months of charging information from each location to help us be better informed going forward. These charges provide the additional benefits of helping enable regional travel while attracting business to the host. We are currently working on plans to announce opportunities to partner with businesses in the North District. So please stay tuned for more opportunities. Here's a slide showing the number of charging visits over time at the research locations. It's important to note that not all of these chargers were installed at the same time. The first went in September 2019, while the last was installed in October of 2020. As you can see, EV drivers are using these chargers, and we hope they are also buying valued services with our business hosts. Next, I would like to talk a little bit about the Electric Reliability Organization, and I understand Julie Esty is going to get a more full review at your session next week. Before I go into the purpose of the ERO, let me provide some background. The rail belt utilities received some criticism over the years for operating independently and creating what some called fiefdoms. Whether it was building new generation or developing reliability or interconnection standards for IPPs, many wanted a central place to get answers. The ERO is therefore designed to consolidate the many functions such as reliability standards, interconnection protocols, and joint generation and transmission planning. The governance of the ERO is envisioned to include key stakeholders in the process, which are listed here. The utilities have been working with the legislature and other stakeholders for several years and supported Senate Bill 123, which authorized the establishment of electric reliability organizations in Alaska. The rail belt utilities all signed a memorandum of understanding that highlighted the steps and process for developing an ERO and has been formally working with other stakeholders in a joint working group. The RCA has developed 3 dockets to review governance, reliability standards, and integrated resource planning regulations. The working group is in the process of creating an application for certification to form a rail belt ERO. The current timeline is to have the regulations set by July 1st of 2021 and selection of the applicant later this year or early next. We really do look forward to a productive and cost-effective regulatory process. As I stated before, we seek your voice and involvement in our cooperative. Our annual election process opens April 16th, and results will be announced at our virtual annual meeting on May 18th. We look forward to increased participation in the election. I really appreciate your time, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Bernie and Aaron and see if you guys have any questions. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Lee. And I guess I have one question back to your electric vehicles. A part of it looks like I saw something that you and other rail belts utilities are planning to put charging stations all the way from Homer, Seward, and all the way up to Fairbanks. Part of that money comes, I think, from the Volkswagen, I don't know what it was called, but the suit that Volkswagen gave us some money, gave the state some money. Could you go into that a little bit more, if you would?
Yeah, it's the VW settlement fund, and that's been the main effort has been taken on by the Alaska Energy Authority, and all the utilities up and down the rail belt have been working with the Energy Authority to try to come up with a method and some cost reimbursement to make sure we get level 3 charging stations up and down the rail belt. So you get rid of the range anxiety by being able to go from Anchorage to the valley, up to the state park and up into Fairbanks, and then down in probably in Girdwood, Cooper Landing, so forth, going down to the peninsula. So all the utilities are currently working, trying to come up with a rate to charge for level 3 charging. And as many of you know, with the demand charge, it becomes very, very expensive under the current rate structure for people to fill up with a level 3 charger. So that is something right now that we're working on with amongst the utilities, and hopefully we'll have something filed here in the next month with the regulatory commission to come up with a very reasonable charge for charging up and down the rail belt. So more to come.
Thank you. I got one more question before I turn it over to Juanetta, if that's okay. Juanetta?
Go ahead.
You talked a little bit about the decline in sales. Is part of the decline in sales the exit of people leaving the state, or is it because they're getting more efficient, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of everything. I think what you're seeing is a lot of the businesses, have really shut down. So you've got the hotel businesses, people involved with the tourist industry, the large businesses, many people are working at home. So you have fewer people in, the facilities in downtown, in the bigger commercial areas. So I think you're seeing a lot of it is due to the COVID issues with businesses being closed and, less tourism business and so forth. So that's probably one component. The other component is obviously people moving out of state with the overall economy. And obviously when we don't have as much efforts going on the North Slope, the oil industry is down, and, general business is down in town. So that does require, there is an outward migration for general population in town. And then the third one, obviously, is people are being more efficient and using less electricity than they did many years ago. So there's probably three particular areas where there's been less sales.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Juanetta. I'm assuming that she has some people asking questions online. So Juanetta, please go right ahead and ask your question.
All right. Thank you, Bernie. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bernie. All right, I'm going to call an audible. We also have Isaac Vanderberg with Launch Alaska on board. He's a Commonwealth North board member, and Isaac has a question for you. Go ahead, Isaac.
Sure. Thanks, Juanetta. Hi, Lee. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm curious, just thinking, a little bit long term, kind of like on a decade's perspective, and anticipating kind of potential increases in Cook Inlet gas prices over time. Do you take a view on what the potential generation mix could be, 10, 20 years out, to ensure that we keep the rail belt prices down?
You bet, and that's something that, our board's been looking at a lot, is looking at more renewables and different alternatives. Obviously, we have, a fairly fresh fleet of gas turbines, which are very efficient. And they've been, from the old fleet, they've been about 20 to 30% more efficient. We do have the Beluga River gas field where we've got a 2/3 interest in that. And roughly half of Chugach's gas comes from the BRU. And we're currently working with Hillcore and trying to find better ways to expand and, provide more gas out of that Beluga River field. And that's something that we're working on that will maintain fuel costs. The other thing we're looking at is just, it's hydroelectric, it's solar, wind products. So I think a number of things, there's the geothermal resource over at Mount Spur. I talked to a gentleman yesterday that are currently going to look at that again. And it could be a couple years down the road, but they want to take a look at the potential resource for that. So we are looking at other options, and we'll continue to ask, the community if they have suggestions, and we'll try to do an RFP actually this coming year on putting additional resources in our facilities.
Wonderful.
So,
And can I ask a follow-up to that?
You bet.
Curious also if there's discussion about some electrification of key residential loads like hot water and even conversion of stoves to electricity, and if utility views that as kind of a potential growth area in terms of being able to sell more electrons, and if there's any modeling being done around that kind of potential increase in home electrification.
Yeah, I think many years ago, I think Chugach, probably 40 years ago, was selling hot water heaters to increase revenues. But I think with natural gas, the hot water heating and furnaces and so forth are much more efficient with natural gas. So I think as long as Anchorage has a natural gas source, that's probably going to be a better alternative for our members. I think the one thing that we are looking at for increase is the electric vehicles. And with electric vehicles, you get the benefit of, it only costs you about half as much to fill up at the charging station rather than the gas station. And, it's going to be much better for the environment. It produces significantly less emissions than with a combustion engine. So I think really it's the electric vehicles that I think will take off. And as we said, they're increasing about 25% per year. And although we only have 1,300 today, those numbers will add up over time. So our bottom line is trying to be as efficient as we can be and take advantage of those resources.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Isaac and Lee. Just as a reminder to the audience, you can submit any of your questions in the chat panel at any time. Lee, anytime an organization goes through a major change like a merger, there's lots of change management issues. And you mentioned certainly that you've taken on 23,000 additional employees. And that's a huge number to integrate into a new corporate culture, if you will. But it strikes me that maybe this merger is also an advantage because of the challenges of finding qualified workers in many key occupations in the electrical industry. Can you speak to that in terms of previous challenges and how the merger maybe has helped you address some of those issues? Yeah,
that's just an absolute great thing, because when we went through this and I went around the community and talked about, having to right size the organization over time, I always said I was more concerned about keeping the good quality employees than having too many. And, we're looking at significant retirements in this age. We've got a number of employees that have retired here in the last year. As I said, we're probably down over 20 and probably closer to 40 at the end of the year. And really, and in this COVID environment too, people are not jumping up to run up to Alaska to take on these new jobs. So it's been very difficult to attract new employees. So it's really been an advantage to take advantage of the resources that we got from ML&P. And they had, a very, very good group of people. And so it's been much better to combine the expertise of the two organizations rather than having to, bring in resources from the outside. And if you have two organizations, it just compounds the problem. So I think we really have benefited, although it's been a challenge, with COVID. It really, I think, is going to be to everybody's best advantage by having this consolidation.
Great, thanks. And Julie Haskett corrected me, I misspoke. 23,000 new customers, 270 new employees. So thanks for that correction, appreciate it. All right.
Be really busy with that many employees.
Yeah, exactly. A question regarding the COVID impacts. You've talked about reduction in usage, largely from the changes in commercial and business activity. We had heard earlier from NSTAR about them monitoring early days in the COVID pandemic, about monitoring residential accounts for late and uncollectible status. Can you speak to that a little bit about what Chugach's experience has been over the course of the year?
Yeah, we've definitely seen more uncollectibles. And as you recall, we had a no disconnect policy. And if people fill out a form that, they can't meet their bills, they can sign a form that says they're running into problems due to the COVID. And then we put them on a program where they can pay over a longer period of time. We have seen, considerable increase in our, the accounts due over 60 days. But actually at the end of December, we had a great program that was put together with the CARES Act through the municipality that paid to Chugach members over $1 million. So we had at the time about $1.6 million in outstanding debt, and $1 million of that was relieved through the CARES Act. So that's been a huge benefit to our members. And I think there are programs now through looking at rent relief for electric and gas, the utility use. So I think there'll be additional funds available for members. But we have seen an increase. This has been, the CARES Act and the funding has been a benefit. And as we move forward, I think you're going to see the reconnects or the disconnects probably start again, probably in the May timeframe for us. And then we'll be working with members to stretch out, those payments over, probably a 12-month period to ease. And hopefully things will get back to normal here very quickly with, the vaccines that are out there.
Along those lines, are there any operational issues or service delivery issues that you are anticipating as we do come out of the pandemic and the population is becoming more mobile, perhaps returning back to the workplace in a more pre-pandemic form? What are some of the things that you're anticipating as an organization in the months ahead?
Well, I think the operational issues, from operating, business has been as usual. We've changed the way our crews are structured a bit. We've got them located in different spots around town rather than everybody showing up at one space. We've tried to segregate our employees. We only have about 50% penetration within the building. A lot of people are working. We have roughly 80 people that are working from home. So really from an operational standpoint, we've got people segregated, but we're still providing the service. And what I can say is I'm really impressed with the employees that have been working at home, customer service representatives, the IT folks, and we are getting great production from them. So I think we've learned something through this process as well, as you can do business a little bit differently, but still meet the needs of the membership. So I think if I was a member, I wouldn't be too concerned. We are providing the services. It might be in a little bit different format here and there. We do have our down in the North District, we do have the drive-through that's available, but we have the lobby closed. We do have the lobby open on the South District, so members can come in. But again, you're limited to the number that can come in at any given time. But they've been great at answering the phones and answering questions from members. And I think the big thing will be working with members to make sure that if they can't pay their bills, that we get that done in the best way we can to work with them.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you for that. You mentioned electrical vehicles and the infrastructure required for that and some of the growth that's happening in that space. I should also add congratulations for having Sean Scaling on board. I've worked with him in the past at Ada, and he's a creative and innovative guy. So glad to know that he's on the case there for electrical vehicles.
I agree.
Sometimes people are concerned about the transition to new technologies. And in this case, obviously, with switching from vehicles, combustion engine vehicles to electrical vehicles, concern about the long-term availability of natural gas and what those impacts might be on electrical costs overall. So can you speak to that, maybe with regard to how other jurisdictions are dealing with that transition, or what you might be projecting for the Anchorage area?
Well, I think, what I made a comment before that, you can fill up, with electricity for about half the cost it does for, of a combustion engine. And I think that will stay fairly constant going forward. I think as electric prices, you're going to see general increases over time with increases in fuel cost. But I think, with more renewables and those types of things, we can limit that increase. And the combustion engines, I think, the price of oil, that's in the same range. So everything's going to go up together. But I see the electric vehicles really long-term being more cost effective. And I think the biggest differential right now is that added upfront cost of the purchase, because electric vehicles do cost more than the combustions. But I think that with the battery technologies, you're seeing those costs go down every year. I would venture within the next 10 years that the electric vehicles will be roughly the same cost as a combustion engine vehicle.
If only I weren't shopping for one now.
And you get tax break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to call another audible and go back to our board members online. Bernie and Isaac, do you have any additional follow-up questions for Lee? Go ahead, Bernie.
This is Bernie. I'd like to have Lee, you speak to the renewables that are out there, that how you are integrating those into your system. Obviously, you have a Ceres wind farm over there, but it looks like more and more people are trying to use solar for homes and in other larger solar projects on the rail belt. And then the other follow-up question would be, where do you stand on your best battery? I know that Homer Electric is putting a battery system down there, and I thought that y'all were also putting a battery system in to kind of help with the fluctuation of wind power or solar power. Could you speak to both of those?
You bet, Bernie. And the second one really goes into the first, but we are looking at a number of areas. Number one, people are doing more rooftop solar. So we have a number of installations with Solarize Anchorage. We've seen a significant increase in that. Chugach is negotiating with a couple parties right now for, larger, in the 1 megawatt to several megawatt solar farms, the bigger installations. And all that does require, regulation. I know, Fire Island Wind would like to have a phase 2 of additional wind. And all that does require regulation, but we are looking at a battery energy storage system. And the primary reason for battery energy storage is to take care of reliability in the rail belt. And when we moved away from the bigger frame machines to the lighter aeroderivatives, we have probably more, it's just less robust than it was before. So the system swings back and forth a lot more. So we really are using the battery to improve reliability within the rail belt up and down. And it'll also reduce our fuel cost. We can use spin on the battery rather than spinning with the combustion turbine. And that spin will also work for renewables. And what we're seeing is you can probably get twice as long or twice as big a battery for the same cost as you can right now. With the way the technologies are working, you can get more battery for bang for the buck. So really you can have a bigger battery. The half of it will take care of your reliability issues, and the other we can use to offset for renewables. So I see that as a way of taking care of it. We're currently in the engineering stage. We'll probably be going out for bid on our battery later this year, but it is in our 5-year plan, and we hope to have it in place in a couple of years. Good question.
Okay, and Isaac?
No further questions. I just wanted to thank you and your staff for keeping the lights on during the pandemic. It's impressive to see how you were able to be flexible and provide this critical service. So anytime I meet someone that works with the electric utility, say thanks, because that was tremendous. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, we got a great number of employees here at Chugach, and I know the other utilities have the same. So we're all working together.
Lee, certainly fresh in most people's minds around the country after watching the situation in Texas is what's the redundancy and resiliency of the electrical system, and certainly the Reliability Council will speak to some of those issues next week. But are there things specific to Chugach that you could speak to more about responding to an extreme weather event like that? Obviously, we're a little bit more seasonally prepared, but
yeah, I think, if I look at the Texas situation, and again, I'm not an expert in Texas, but there were a combination of things that happened that resulted in, the ultimate problem. And in any system, it takes more than one event that, cascades. So in Texas, you had multiple things. You had, obviously the cold weather. And from what I understand, the generation, both, gas-fired, coal-fired, wind projects, all of them had icing problems where they're, with the power plants, they had outside controls that were a problem. With the wind turbines, they got iced up. But generally, they weren't prepared, or their systems weren't prepared for cold weather. Obviously in Alaska, we think we deal with that every year. So those issues are taken care of. The other thing in Texas is, the gas distribution system ran into a number of icing issues and freeze up. So then a gas plant that would, rely on natural gas was down because they didn't have a supply. That created a problem. Chugach in the South Central area, working, with NSTAR, there's multiple gas pipelines. And one of the issues we do is we keep a plant in the Beluga area that's not as efficient as our generation in Anchorage, but it can supply all the power for Anchorage if we had a gas delivery problem with, say, a problem underneath the river, or a leak somewhere else on the pipeline. So we have our power plant located right on top of the gas field, and that provides that redundancy that really helps. The other thing I think that was a problem down in Texas was the marketplace, and it was, generally they only increase the price of generation when they really need to. It's very infrequent that they need to jack the prices up. But from what I understand, they went from like $1,200 a megawatt to over $9,000 per megawatt hour. And that lasted for 3 or 4 days. So they created a huge expense of, I think it was like $16 billion with that increased cost. And the market doesn't really work. You can't ask generators to start up if you don't have the generation to start with. So I think counting on market prices to fix it just didn't work for Texas. In a normal situation, it probably would, but when they lost over 50% of their generation in the state, they just had, you could have charged 100,000 and they wouldn't have been any better off. So anyway, I think they've got market issues. They've got, reliability issues to work with, the generators to make sure they can cover cold seasons. And I think they need to take a look at their gas distribution systems. So anyway, I think a number of things failed. I think we are better prepared in Alaska, obviously, for those circumstances. But, I think one thing we're looking at is, having batteries on the rail belt will make a huge benefit to us. We're also looking at redundancy in transmission. And by getting more robust transmission from our, as example, the Bradley Lake Hydroelectric project, we can make sure we get better transfers and flexibility up and down the rail belt. And I think that also helps out on renewables. And so the renewables can be placed basically where they're most efficient and then be shared up and down the rail belt. So I hope that answered a little bit of it.
Absolutely. Well, I had a lot of cold cousins, so we'll see. With some of those thoughts in mind, does Chugach internally have targets for adding on alternative sources, or what's the status there?
Yeah, right now the board, we had a strategic planning session here this last year. And my goal right now is to increase our renewable energy by 100,000 megawatt hours by 2025. So over a 5-year period, they asked me to increase it by 100,000 megawatt hours. And I think we are currently looking at other things that would look maybe at carbon reduction rather than just renewables. So it might be a combined goal.
Interesting.
But I think right now we have about a little over 23% renewables right now between the hydroelectric facilities we have and the wind project, and then looking at some of the solar projects.
Great. And with regard to extreme events, I mean, how do you guys model or prepare for extreme events, or looking at long-term preparedness for certain circumstances?
Yeah, and that really goes into the planning of the systems, and you've got, the engineers look at what they call single contingencies, multiple contingencies, and, they call them N-1, N-1, But when you go through your planning process, that you make sure that you've got enough generation and enough capacity on, substations, your distribution lines that are, make sure the wire is large enough to carry a bunch of, say, the whole block lines up for electric vehicles. You want to make sure that your wire sizes are correct, that your transformers are sized correctly. So it's really a long-term planning, and you plan for the worst. And that's always how the electric systems work that I've been involved with. Great.
We have a question from the audience, and I apologize if I massacre your name. I think it's Jan Vandentop, talking about the fact that wind is usually the riskiest aspect of for us with regard to electrical, and how do you plan for wind events within the electrical system?
Yeah, wind is one of those really tough things that we look at, because we get the Chinooks that come off the mountains at 100 miles an hour. I usually feel pretty good that our system holds together up to about 80, and after 80, it's really, really tough. So really, what you can do is look at undergrounding. Unfortunately, a lot of the areas where you have the highest impact is up on the upper hillsides, and it's extremely difficult to underground. So what we have to do is look at a robust right-of-way clearing program and make sure that the structures, are large enough to withstand. And sometimes it's just, Mother Nature takes over, and you make sure that things break apart and you can put them back together. Because sometimes if you try to make them too strong, then you have a catastrophic event. Whereas if you have some breakaway structures, that does help. And we found that with avalanche as an example. Avalanche will come down and knock out, a mile of line, But if you raise the structures up, or if you put breakaways in, then you limit the damage, and it's easier to put things back together. So practice makes perfect.
Absolutely. You mentioned undergrounding. Are there any active programs, or can you speak to any active programs to increase undergrounding of Chugach infrastructure?
Yeah, the municipality has an undergrounding ordinance. So we are required to put in underground each year. We charge our members, there's basically a 2% fee that's on your bill for undergrounding. And we have a 5-year program. We do have that program identified on our website. You can look up the plan to see where we're undergrounding. But it's a constant effort of replacing overhead facilities with underground.
Great. All right. Well, Lee, that's looks like all the questions that we have. And so just like to say thank you for being with us today. I'm going to turn it back to Bernie for some closing remarks. And again, thanks to everybody for being with us today.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Very informative as always. And I just want to follow up a little bit more on that underground. You know, MLMP had a program that they were taking out X number of dollars. And did I hear you say that Chugach also has that, or are y'all following into what MLMP was doing? I'm just want some clarification.
Yeah, both Chugach and MLMP had their own 5-year plan.
Okay.
And so we will get those consolidated into one plan. But right now there is a separate plan for MLMP and Chugach. But we both have them, and we'll just consolidate them going forward.
Well, thank you. And I really thank you for taking the time, because I know you're extremely busy, as all of the rail belt utilities are right now, especially with dealing with the RCA and the R dockets that are out there. So thank you very much, and wish the best for you. That's it.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
And Aaron, do you want to say a word about next week, please?
Yeah, and you can register whenever you like. The next Friday, same time, we'll have Julie Etsy from MEA and Chris Rose from REAP. They're working on the Rail Belt Reliability Organization, and they'll talk about developing that for the independent and utility electric producers along the rail belt. So stay tuned as we continue along this theme of understanding our infrastructure in South Central.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.